Hello, everyone. My name is Alia Thobani, and on behalf of the Aga Khan Education Board for the United Arab Emirates and the Youth and Sports Portfolio, I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Home-Based Strategies to Support Family Well-Being. Simply put, well-being is happiness. We all want our families to be happy. Looking at each individual family member's physical and psychological well-being, as well as the quality of relationships between each family member, is important in understanding how to promote happiness within a family unit. There are common and important strategies that can be implemented in each family to support their overall family well-being. To help us uncover some of these strategies is our speaker, Dr. Ruba Tabari, who will be interviewed by Karishma Bensali Mehta. About Ruba. We welcome you, Ruba. Dr. Ruba is a clinical director and educational psychologist at the Developing Child Center in Dubai. With over 28 years of experience in the field of education and educational psychology across the UK and the Middle East, Ruba brings expertise, evidence-based practice, empathy, and passion to her practice. Ruba obtained her doctoral degree from University College London in 2012 with a focus on school development and reform. This was preceded by a master's degree in educational psychology from UCL in 1994 and a bachelor's degree in psychology in 1987. Ruba's work in the UK, UAE, and wider within the GCC and MENA region has given her an international expertise and a multicultural approach to her work. An international speaker and presenter, Ruba is a highly recognized member of the Dubai community. She participated in the With Hope Dubai part of the Creative Lab, that's part of Dubai Government Accelerator, on child and adolescent mental health. Welcome, Ruba. We're so happy to have you here today. And now I'd like to introduce to you today the interviewer, who is Karishma Bensali Mehta. Welcome, Karishma. Karishma Bensali Mehta is the Dubai-based founder of the 21st Century Parenting platform, As We Speak. She's been a journalist for the last 16 years and a mother of 2 boys. Through her expert opinions, credible research, and her own experiences, Karishma explores the challenges we face and the situations we can embrace as families navigate this unprecedented 21st century future, with 1 weekly episode at a time. As We Speak is an incredible YouTube channel that you can find. It's accessible on YouTube and also on her Instagram at As We Speak Now. Welcome, Karishma. And with that, I pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Alia, for having me in this very timely discussion. And Dr. Ruba, it's so lovely to have you, and thank you so much for doing this. So Dr. Ruba, what is the definition of family well-being, and why is it so important?
Hi, Karishma, nice to see you. It is an interesting question, actually, because well-being has become such a buzzword in the last year because of everything that's been happening. And sometimes we forget that what does it, we ask ourselves, what does it actually mean? And we can look at it in more than in a variety of ways. So, for example, you can look at family well-being as physical, emotional, social well-being, but there's also another aspect to it, which is about having fulfillment, flourishing, thriving, achieving your potential individually as well as a family. So there isn't really one focus, and it's not just about happiness. It's a lot richer than that and a lot deeper than that.
And what do you think the factors are that contribute to this overall well-being?
I think if we look at it from a psychological perspective, we know that with many studies that have looked at happiness over years, longitudinal studies that have looked at happiness over years, if we're thinking of happiness as well-being here at the moment, then we know that some of the things that really matter are connectedness. So being able to feel that you're part of a community, being able to thrive, being able to achieve your potential, to feel that you're a productive member of society. And simply, one of the top things is to be able to walk out into the street and to recognize your grocer or be recognized. So our feelings of being rooted and belonging, and while at the same time achieving our potential, contribute a lot to well-being. But in the recent events, I suppose, with COVID and everything else that's been happening last year, other stresses have come in. So while we were initially focused, maybe well-being in general was focused on those aspects, we've gone down to that survival level where we're actually looking at, are we stressed? Are we anxious? Do we have a job? Do we have time for our children? What are our children doing? So we've gone from that, I suppose, the top of the triangle of well-being, where we're looking at ourselves and growth, to looking at our basic needs. And we're looking at, do we really have those basic needs to even begin to say that we are happy and we're feeling well?
Right. It's interesting you talked about our personal basic needs, because that's exactly what feeds into the family well-being. So how is our individual well-being, or our individual need, as you said right now, to just survive happily at this particular point, how is it related to the well-being of the entire family unit?
So what I think has been really interesting is that I think we've all been, whether overtly, whether we've expressed it, whether we've even been conscious of it, we've all been experiencing this sort of hidden underlying anxiety and stress. And so when we're looking at family well-being, we need to kind of address each member on their own, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're one united unit, and you can't really separate one from the other. Everybody interrelates, and we can't stop interacting within the house, and we can't stop interacting within our home. So whatever is experienced by one individual will have a knock-on effect on somebody else at home. And sometimes we mistakenly think that one person can sort of cope on their own, or cover up, or pretend that things are okay. But we do know from research that actually this isn't the fact at all, and that even children, adults, and other people, there is that kind of, I suppose, a rhythm to a home, which is sensed by people and children and other people who live in the home. And whether we pretend that it's okay or not is not enough. It will be sensed, and it will have impact. So when we're looking at family well-being and individual well-being, we need to think of the needs of each individual, and to think about, are their needs being met? What are they doing to support, how are they managing to stay well? And like I said, I think at the moment, everybody's been going through this underlying stress and anxiety, whether it's overtly felt or not. And we need to think of ways of reflecting, being mindful of our own feelings, I suppose, and being mindful of how we're impacting people around us within our home, and to think of ways that we can help ourselves and in return help others around us. And maybe just help others around us if we feel that we're okay.
Yeah. So what are some practical tips, strategies, practices for individual well-being?
So I think, like I always say whenever I do a presentation, actually, it starts with the individual. And within a home, it starts with the adults. Because I feel it's very difficult if you're not in a place emotionally or physically or socially to support somebody else. It's very difficult then to offer genuine support and for it to have an impact. And this is really a very difficult thing to say, because a lot of what's going on for some people is out of their control. It's not that people are choosing to feel unwell or putting themselves in a position that's unwell. It's just circumstance. And this year has been particularly difficult because there's been a lot out of people's control. So to say to adults lightly, well, look after yourself, is easier said than done. It's a very easy comment to make, but in reality, it's a very difficult one to follow. So, but I will say it because unfortunately, it is the truth. We do need to look after ourselves. If I'm a mother and I'm completely strained and I'm not sleeping well, I'm panicking about work or about our financial situation, I'm concerned about what my children are doing, how they're doing at school, social media, my husband's work, all sorts of things. Our tolerance level, we all have a threshold. We're all human at the end of the day, and our threshold is going to have a limit. And so I'm going to be more explosive, or I'm going to be more stressed. I'm not going to cope with as much. things that I might have absorbed in the past become big and I can't cope with them. And so it is important to find ways to be able to cope. And some of those are about being mindful. There's some basic ones that are pretty well spoken about, I suppose, now in the literature and on the radio, TV. I mean, everybody's being, communities have been trying to be supportive. And there'll be things like making sure that you're eating well, trying to be healthy, making sure that you're sleeping well. I think we sometimes underestimate the power of sleep and the importance of getting those 8 hours in. People often say, well, I don't need that many hours. Well, research shows that we do, whether your body feels it or not. People do need those many hours of sleep. It's a chance for our bodies to relax and unwind, being active. And again, some people underestimate the importance of being active. And being active doesn't mean you have to be an athlete out there 6-7 days a week. We have to begin at a realistic point. We have to begin where it's doable. Being active could be just going for a walk to the shop instead of, maybe driving, maybe going around the block. And if that's not available to you, dancing at home, putting on a video and following it, having fun with your children, then you're all exercising. If you don't have the facilities or the space to do proper exercise, there's always an option at home. So any of those things, doing yoga, whatever it is, being active is just moving. You could do gardening, you could do whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. I look at being active as moving, as opposed to having a very sedentary life where you're sitting at the sofa the whole time. So, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you're being active. And then I suppose another one is staying connected. And that's really very important. And I think it's so important for the adults, because I think I'm always preaching about children staying connected, but I think sometimes the adults also underestimate how important it is to be connected. And connected isn't just about doing your social obligations. Oh, I have to host a dinner, or I have to take someone, call somebody because it's my social obligation to do that. That's not the connectedness that will give relief. I think the sort of connectedness that supports is the connectedness where you can be yourself and open and actually be vulnerable and say to someone, actually, I am really stressed. I'm not coping, and just talk about emotions. I think somehow in the drive for everybody to be happy, sometimes we lose people and we forget that people aren't always happy, and it's okay. And giving them that space to say, well, actually, I'm not happy. I am stressed, and this is really annoying me. Sometimes that in itself gives relief. The other things that people can do, and I again believe in that, sort of taking time out for yourself. And again, it's not about, oh, I need 2 hours to go relax and do my own thing. It doesn't have to be 2 hours. Sometimes just having 5 minutes is actually enough. If you spend 5 minutes, just close your eyes, find a quiet corner in the house, and there's always a quiet corner, even if it's the bathroom, and just doing deep breathing, trying to still your mind. It's amazing what 5 minutes can do. And people are better off doing 5 minutes than, again, aiming for this super meditation exercise that they'll never have time for. So I think part of feeling better and part of some of the strategies that support well-being is starting with what is realistic for each family and then taking it from there, and not sort of trying to go with that perfect image of what we see on the screens and what we hear about, because most of it, a lot of it doesn't fit into everyday life, doesn't easily fit into everyday life.
You're right. It's unrealistic, and it's almost overwhelming, when you see these sort of cookie cutter images and videos and think, can that really happen to me at this time? So, as you said, by circumstance, we're spending so much more time with our families. And, what are practical tips that we can do as a family unit for our well-being as a family unit and stay more connected within our family unit?
So I think some of the things, you're right. I think families are spending a lot more time together now. And for the most part, it's been fantastic. It's been really healthy, and it's had very positive impact, but not everywhere and not all the time. And that's okay as well. And I think even when family one of the things that I would advocate, even if you are spending a lot of time together, to also remember that people do need time alone. Time alone isn't a negative thing. We all need a little bit of space just to hear our own thoughts and be in our own zone. And I think that's important for children as well as adults. I don't think that anybody needs to be scheduled and busy the whole time. Saying that, I think it's a great time for children to learn a little bit more about empathy and a little bit more about life in a realistic way, in a way that maybe they weren't so conscious about before, and to get involved with daily things at home and daily activities, helping with meal making or chores, taking off some of the burden from parents. It's a great opportunity for them. The number of children that I know that don't understand what it takes to kind of do all these things, because parents feel it's loving not to involve them, and it's our role as parents to do things for our children. But now is the time to sort of pull back a little bit and say, okay, what else can we do? You can also introduce new things maybe that you haven't tried in the past, where you have game nights. Again, the value of sitting around a board for children in terms of learning social skills, in terms of turn taking, in terms of, depending on the game you choose, you can develop all sorts of academic and life skills. Is a really powerful one, and it's one that produces fun. So, you know, what can be better than doing fun and learning at the same time? So having those sorts of things, having maybe taking turns in deciding the menu and cooking, depending on the age of your child, maybe somebody else taking responsibility for the meal and having fun around that and sort of really going all out. It just depends on the family and their creativity. But I would say, I suppose, get them involved in chores, give them a feel for what real life is, give them a feel for what it takes for a home to run, get them, you know, and then introduce little things like game night, movie night, where you're actually drawing them away from their bedrooms, away from their cocooned worlds, into something that will have more meaning, and it will be healthier for them in the long run, while at the same time respecting that everybody does need a bit of time on their own.
Yeah. So living in the present, everyone's talking about mindfulness, and what's happening around us is literally forcing us to take one day at a time. But living in the present is so much easier said than done. And how does one achieve this mindset?
I'll tell you mine, which you're going to find really funny. I like looking at trees. So I have this thing where I need to have a tree outside my window. So when we moved homes in Dubai and we bought where we are now, I was like, I need a tree outside my window. I won't buy any place without a tree. It doesn't matter the size of the tree. And it's really powerful way of being in the moment. To be in the moment, you need to focus on your sensation right now. And that's what brings us into the moment. Again, it's not about these larger than life solutions. I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. Most people actually probably find meditation quite difficult, including myself. 20 minutes is a long time to be still. But if you look at the tree, it brings you in the moment, because it stops you looking at other things. It stops you thinking about anything else, and looking at the tree in an active way. So I'm looking at the leaves, the way the leaves are blowing with the wind, the color of the leaves, what their shape is. It brings you into the moment. And that's really the power of being in the moment. If you're eating, don't be on your phone, don't watch a movie. Really think about the taste, think about how the food feels in your mouth, think about the different flavors that you're experiencing. If you're talking to somebody, really look at them and think about, well, you know, how is their face? What are their features like? So anything that brings you into the moment, where we think about our senses, our sensations, the feeling, the seeing, the hearing, those kinds of experiences bring our mind into the moment, because for most of us, our mind is always racing, trying to think about the past and the future. And it's only by engaging our senses in what we're doing right now. How does the chair feel under me? Am I comfortable? What am I feeling? Is when you bring yourself into the moment and into the present.
It's funny you mentioned trees. Someone else said talking to trees is just unbelievable as well. So there's something about the trees. You've mentioned some of this, but if we could just come back to it, you know, we hear the words grit and resilience, empathy, 21st century skills, especially in the uncertainty that we find ourselves in right now. what are some examples of how to use current circumstances to teach these skills?
So we talked about kind of involving children with the home and the activities, but I think resilience is more than that. I think resilience is about learning that life isn't one big happy ending, and it's not going to be easy all the time. I think the biggest lesson, certainly for children and probably some adults as well, is that it isn't easy and it's not always great, and we're not always meant to be happy. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's reality. And I think when we learn to start to accept that reality, it makes it easier to accept those moments when they come. Now, when they come, resilience is about, and grit is about, being able to cope with those moments. It's not about being strong all the time. It's about being in those moments, but still being able to come out of them and say, okay, I can go on. Yes, I've had a knock. Yes, I didn't like what happened, but how can I keep going? And so when we're thinking of it along those lines, and we're thinking about family life, I think an important thing for families to do is to be transparent with emotions and feelings. Sometimes we don't use enough feeling words around homes, and we sort of, everybody wants to be strong and they feel that they want to look like they're coping, especially parents. And they feel that if they share weakness with their children, that's teaching them the wrong things, because, you know, parents are meant to be complete and whole and you know, yeah, they can't go wrong, right? And so if we start to introduce feelings into our home and talk about that, you know, maybe we don't feel perfect, but then you build onto that. It's not just about sitting there and having a sad, you know, sad party, moping around. It's not that. It's about saying, well, you know what, I'm having a hard time, but then, you know, I want to focus on what is working. And you know, and then verbalize those thoughts to your children and around the family, the thoughts that allow people to feel, well, yes, we can go on. Maybe it's not perfect, but there is some sort of thread that we can hang on to and create positivity. And I think that's something that parents can easily introduce into the home. And to, when their children feel bad, or their children, you know, things don't go as children want, they go to school, maybe they don't get the grade they want, or they're not able to sit with their friend in the current circumstance because their friend is in another sector or another class, to say, well, yes, it's sad and it's not fun, and I can understand it's really hard, but, you know, look at how well you're doing in school, and then problem solve. So I guess the 3 steps, if I'm going to give families 3 steps, is 1, introduce feelings and accept that, you know, there is good and bad. Emotions are positive and negative. We don't all just live with positive emotion. So those emotions exist, and be open about them. Secondly, share with the family, kind of openly talk to them about how you as an adult are tackling it, what thoughts go through your mind, and how you're viewing the situation and how you're trying to handle it. And hopefully the adult is doing well. And then thirdly, to problem solve together and to think about, well, what can we do together? So how else can we do things differently? What can we do to make things more fun? Or what can we do to connect with your friends? Or what can we do to help you still be accessing some of your activities that you enjoyed before? Those kinds of problem solving exercises.
I'm going to skip to the 9th one because you've just touched on it. You know, you've talked about this whole notion and preoccupation we have with happiness. And there's another catchphrase right now: think positive, think positive. You know, it puts so much pressure on individuals, especially in the present moment we're all living in. Do you think this mantra is beneficial, or do you think it leads to more anxiety?
I think it's one of those mantras that mean very different things to different people, and very difficult to do. Another one of those. You know, I try and say it, but most people don't know how to do it. It is, again, one of these phrases that everybody uses, but what does it actually mean to think positive? Like, what is it actually? How do you actually, if you're feeling miserable, you know, how do you get yourself to see that silver lining and feel positive about something? And so, you know, it is actually about reflection, and all these things are really connected. And I think thinking positive is probably one of the hardest things to achieve and takes time to learn. And it's about reflecting. It's about thinking, okay, I'm feeling miserable, but what did I actually gain, if anything? And looking for those small gains that you might have had from something. So you, for example, in lockdown, parents who traveled a lot didn't travel a lot. And while it may be created more tension at home and maybe people getting fed up of being in the same space and, they're getting on each other's nerves, a good, one positive, this is just an example, one positive thing is, well, they're not traveling as much and now they're getting to have the opportunity to even argue. I mean, that's a privilege sometimes, the fact that they're around to fight with. So, so it's not about being, seeing the positive isn't about things feeling perfect. It's about saying, well, what am I gaining that is different that I wouldn't have had otherwise from this situation? So it's not about, oh, well, now it's perfect and I'm loving this. No, because I don't think any of us is loving the moment, but we're all trying to make the best of it. And we're all trying to see, well, what can I gain from it? What has it given me that it didn't give me otherwise? Is it, for me, for example, I'm spending more time indoors in my home. Sometimes when I work and it's long hours, I feel like I spend more time at work than I do at home. And now I'm enjoying my home a lot more. So yes, I'm fed up of being at home and, we're all fed up, but equally, I have to remember, oh, I am enjoying, I can be at home now. And so to remind yourself, you need to kind of remind yourself what wasn't working before and what did you gain right now to sort of focus on the positive.
Right. And we're all experiencing these really big emotions right now, parents as well as kids. How do we harness these big emotions to help each family member grow and develop?
And I think we kind of touched on that as well before with the resilience. And I think it is very few families are, we all talk about emotional intelligence, which is another buzzword, but and sort of being in touch with emotions and knowing how to connect with people. But again, I think all these things are so easy to say and so difficult to learn to do. And this is another one, sort of, most of us want to talk about the happy things. We don't want to sit and talk about the bad things. We don't want to we don't want to sit and talk about how we're all anxious. We don't want to sit and talk about how we're all stressed. We want to talk about, well, are you happy? We're all consumed with trying to make sure everybody at home is happy. But sometimes we don't even own the solutions. And sometimes the situation is such that we cannot fix things. But being able to express your emotions, being able to talk about and teaching our children what it feels like, what does it actually mean to be stressed? And what does it mean to be anxious is important. And one of the tools that I love to share with families and parents is about sort of keeping a check on reality as well. And this is a really good exercise with children, but you can only do it once you start talking about these negative emotions. And that is to talk to them, for example, about how big is your problem or how big is your anger? Because a lot of us can overreact. And when we're stressed and under pressure, we overreact. And then for many of us, after we calm down, we regret it and we think, well, that was really trivial. It didn't really need this big reaction. And that's something we can start to teach our children. And because now we're going through these complexity of emotions, where maybe before we weren't readily going through them, when everybody was busy at school and out and about and doing their thing, it is an opportunity now for us to sit and say, well, yes, we're all feeling anxious, but let's put this into perspective. How big really is this problem? Do we have an earthquake here? Are we looking, do we have a home? Do we have a roof over our heads? We're quite privileged here and we forget how privileged we are. So just reminding ourselves of giving the children the scale of, sort of talking about what is a low problem? What is the low level problem? What is the middle sized problem? What is the big problem? And how do we react to these and the emotions that go with them?
And they should sort of scale it, as in this would be a 1 on a 10, this would be 1 on 10, or this would be a 5 on 10.
Exactly.
Right. And does this sort of feed into sort of gratitude as well, sort of the practice of gratitude? Yes,
it does. And I think it's really interesting because the children I've tried this with are all very good at it. And they smile because they know, they know when they're blowing things out of proportion or when a problem isn't really that big. and it does really ground them. And it does then allow them to feel, well, you know, maybe I am in a good place after all. Maybe things are not as bad as they can be.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think it feeds very well into gratitude.
Right. Now, you've touched upon social media, and it has become a huge part of our lives, screen time, especially right now. You know, we can't do without it. And but how is this really affecting family well-being, and what are the solutions?
I think it's had, I agree with you. I think we're all tired of our screens. At the end of the day, nobody, you know, at least I know for myself, I don't want to even see my computer anymore. I've had enough with it.
The kids are not tired of their screens.
But the kids are not there. That's right. And I think a couple of things here. One of them, we need to remember that not all screen time is equal. So not everything you do in front of a screen has the same impact. Some of it is actually healthy. So if you're spending time in front of a screen connecting with friends, which is much needed, if you, for example, some children have opted to stay home for online learning and they're not accessing their social networks and social life, then that is a healthy way within, you know, as long as it's contained to a time limit. If you're connecting with other families, members across the world, then again, it's not an unhealthy use. If you're doing your work, it's not unhealthy. So there are good, positive uses, ways of using social media. Where it becomes an issue, I feel, is when children are spending a lot of time on games or on things like TikTok and Snapchat. So this TikTok and Snapchat, one aspect of them is that they have a fictitious representation of what real life is, and that's an issue. When people, like you mentioned it before, when you see the perfection in images, and life isn't really like that. And so I think it can create a feeling of that you haven't got enough at home, and a feeling of insecurity. And so it can then start to affect your well-being, whether it's your image or whether it's how much fun other people are having or the clothes they're wearing. It has, and this impact is on adults as well as children. People don't post bad things, they post good things. The feeling that everybody has everything and you don't, which is fictitious, but that's what happens. So it needs to be contained, and it's important that parents regularly remind their children that people are only posting the things they want to show off about. Nobody's going to post the fact that they're sitting at home feeling miserable or bored, and to keep that reality check for them. And then it's the same with the games. I think if you can't control what I would call the less positive side of social media, and you don't sort of instill rules around the house to limit them, then you can have your teenagers particularly stuck in their bedrooms on social media, and you completely lose touch with them. Now, managing it isn't easy. With the younger ones, you can just say, look, these are the rules, this is the time you're allowed, and that's how it's going to go. And I think for most children below the age of 11, they'll comply because they want other, you know, they can be promised other things, and they'll comply because they're kind of used to complying with rules to a large extent. You get more of an issue with teenagers who then say, well, no, this is my life and I decide, and, you know, they feel grown up and can make their own decisions. And that's when you then need to sit down and talk to them about the impact of social media, the positive, the negative, and why you're asking. It's very difficult to engage a teenager without getting that buy-in from them. You only get that buy-in when you sit down with them and you explain to them that you understand their need. So first you have to acknowledge their need and why it's important to them and why they feel that they need to be online for so many hours. And then you explain to them your need as a parent and your role as a parent and your duty as a parent towards them and the responsibility you hold. And then you problem solve, which again comes back to resilience, comes back to well-being, comes back to family relationships. You sit and you problem solve with them and you say, okay, we need to find a happy ground here, because that is not going to work. You being on the computer for beyond school for another 5 hours and not coming out to sit with the family, not communicating with the family, not sharing, is not acceptable. We need to find that happy middle, and then you create new ground rules that hopefully they can buy in and you can all agree to follow.
Dr. Ruba, is there anything else you'd like to contribute to this discussion?
Not really, just to say that I'm happy to answer questions. If people send them to the organization, I'm happy to support and answer specific questions. It's always more difficult when in this forum, when people don't have the opportunity to ask directly what their concerns are. And I'm more than happy to support.
Thank you so much. Alia, over to you.
Yes, on behalf of the Aga Khan Education Board for the UAE and the Youth and Sports Portfolio, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for such an enlightening, engaging discussion. Thank you, Ruba. Thank you, Karishma. We're so appreciative of your time and your knowledge. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we would like to remind all community members that as the COVID-19 virus continues to spread, many countries are moving to normalize a number of economic and other activities, including reopening of schools and workplaces. Physical distancing is still the best protection against the virus. However, where this is not possible, it is now clear that wearing masks is essential. Accordingly, we strongly urge the community to continue wearing face masks at all times in accordance with the government regulations. If all preventative health and safety measures, social distancing of at least 6 feet, avoiding large gatherings and visits, wearing face masks, frequent hand washing and sanitizing are not upheld, there will be a further rise in the number of cases in the coming period, as has been witnessed in other countries. Therefore, community members are urged not to let their guard down and to continue to exercise all precautionary measures to ensure good health, safety, and economic stability for themselves, their families, and the community at large. We encourage the members of the community to sign up to the UAE app, available both on the Apple and Android. This app contains several resources and information beneficial to the community members. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.